All right, so we're going to start here with number 25, a typical voter. So this question gives you some examples and then asks you which one of these examples is a best describes a typical voter. Um, so some of the things that you should look for um, on this one, um, I'm sorry, I said voter. I meant non-voter. Um, so a typical non-voter. So what we're looking for in a typical non-voter is young, unskilled or uneducated, and possibly living in a rural area. They could be living in a city or a rural area, but a rural area would tend to have less access, but you could have less access in a city too. But young, unskilled, living in a rural area. If they're educated, if they're married, if they're older, they're probably going to be a voter. All right, interest groups. There are two questions over interest groups. One is a definition, like what is an interest group, and then another one is like what is a characteristic of an interest group. So let's start with the definition first. The definition is a group of people who influence what the government does in a specific area of special interest. So an interest group is a group of people who influence what the government does in a specific area of special interest. Now, let's move on to the other one, a characteristic of interest groups. When we look at that, we're looking at what is something that they do. And the answer would be interest groups focus on narrow concerns of their members. Interest groups focus on the narrow concerns of their members. So one tells us what it is, a group of people that influence what the government does in a specific area of interest. And the other one tells us they focus only on the narrow concerns of their members. So they're only that one topic, whether it's abortion, guns, environment, healthcare, that type of thing. Poll tax. Um, you need to know the Constitution prohibits poll tax. So you should know the Constitution prohibits poll tax, and poll tax could also be listed as a tax payment requirement for voting. It could also be listed as a tax payment requirement for voting. Motor Voter Act. This was something that was in that layered curriculum unit, so you may or may have not caught it depending on what you ended up doing for some of those. So this one you might want to study a little extra. Um, so the main purpose of the Motor Voter Act is to encourage voter turnout by allowing any voter with a driver's license to vote. The Motor Voter Act is to encourage voter turnout by allowing any voter with a driver's license to vote. It also helps when you get a driver's license, they offer you the option to vote or register to vote. Off-year elections. What you need to know about off-year elections, the voter turnout is lower for off-year elections rather than on-year elections. The voter turnout is lower for off-year elections rather than on-year elections. Polling place. How do they choose a polling place? Selection of a polling place is based on location. The selection of a polling place is based on location. Another layered curriculum question on scientific surveys. This one's kind of a complicated question, so I'll try to make it as easy as possible. What makes a scientific survey? This one kind of talks about like pollsters and presidential, but really what makes a scientific survey is being able to interview or speak with randomly chosen people and randomly chosen area codes. It has to be random in order for it to be a scientific survey. So a scientific survey is talking to or interviewing people in randomly chosen that are in randomly chosen area codes. So even if you randomly choose the people, but you don't randomly choose the area code, you're still getting only one region of the country, which could skew your results. All right. Democratic Party. You know the characteristics of the Democratic Party. This is also from that layered curriculum unit. What do we associate with the Democratic Party? Social welfare, government regulation, improvement of minorities. Democratic Party, social welfare, government regulation, improvement of minorities. Function of a political party. What is the major function of the political party? It acts as a bonding agent for the party, meaning bringing people together. What's the function of a political party? It's a bonding agent for the party. And you actually will find that in my notes that I gave you over even in that layered curriculum unit. National Convention. National Convention. The important function of the National Convention is picking the party's presidential candidate. Important function of the National Convention is to pick the party's presidential candidate. Franking privilege. Franking privilege is the ability to mail with no postage fees. Franking privilege, the ability to mail with no postage fees. House of Representatives. This question comes from one of those questions that we did in those quizzes. So I just copied and pasted this question in. Changed the font a little bit and fixed it a little bit, but basically copy and pasted it. How many members are in the House of Representatives? It's a number question. 435. How many members are in the House of Representatives? 435. There are some number questions on here. The Senate. You need to know that the Senate serve terms that are 6 years long. The Senate. You need to know that the Senate serves terms that are 6 years long. Gerrymandering. This is basically a definition question. When congressional districts are set up to give unfair advantages to the party in power. Gerrymandering. When congressional districts are set up to give unfair advantages to the party in power. Filibuster. Filibuster is an attempt to talk a bill to death. A filibuster is an attempt to talk a bill to death. That came from one of yours too. Well, it was written a little different, but number 40, joint committee. Members of the House and Senate work together to iron out differences in a bill is a joint committee. Members of the House and Senate work together to fix differences in a bill before it's sent to the president. Okay, we'll go back up here to number 41, President of the Senate. You need to know that President of the Senate is also the Vice President of the United States. President of the Senate is the Vice President of the United States. Oh, this question is related to the House of Representatives. So there's another question. I should have a 2 behind that. Oh, I do now. Okay, so the House of Representatives, you should know how many members, but you also should know who, oh, maybe I didn't. No, I didn't. Who the presiding officer of the House of Representatives is, which is the Speaker of the House. All right, a rider. What is a rider? A rider is a provision placed in an important but unrelated bill, which is usually certain to pass. A rider is a provision, like an addition, to an important but unrelated bill that's most likely going to pass. Bureaucrats. That one's also a copy and paste question. People that work in a bureaucracy. Kind of funny. They can sound the same. Fiscal year. Copy and paste question. Is the 12-month period used by the government for record keeping and budgeting. Fiscal year. It is the 12-month period used by the government for record keeping and budgeting. Oops. Number 45. United Nations. Who first proposed the formation of the United Nations? The answer is FDR, and Winston Churchill. And that was one of the diplomacy things that we did over that presidential one. Number 46. This is a complicated question. So there's something called a pocket veto. If the president does not sign a bill and Congress leaves session, so it's not in session anymore, it's considered a pocket veto. He doesn't veto it, he doesn't sign it, Congress isn't in session, it does not become law. But if the president does not sign a bill within 10 days of the time they send it to him and Congress is still in session, the bill passes. Okay? So I'll say that again. If the president does not sign a bill within 10 days of its presentation and Congress is still in session, it is a valid bill, meaning it's a law. A pocket veto is when Congress is not in session. So you need to know the difference between that, because that question, to be honest, is a little bit confusing, but it's also very important for you to know. Treaty approval. In order to be binding, a treaty must be approved by 2/3 vote in the Senate. In order to be binding, a treaty must be approved by 2/3 in the Senate. Electoral votes. Oops, now I'm writing in pen. You just need to know with the electoral votes, what is the number needed to win the presidency? And the correct answer is 270. Number of electoral votes needed to win the presidency, 270. Now this kind of confused people on the last test, so hopefully it doesn't confuse you now. If a Supreme Court justice agrees with the decision in the case, but not the reasons, they write a concurring opinion. Oops, highlight. Come on. Oh, that's cool. No, it's now a pen. Okay. So, concurring opinion. If a Supreme Court justice agrees with the decision the court reaches in the case, but does not agree with the reasons, it's a concurring opinion. If a Supreme Court justice agrees with the decision the court reaches in a case, but not the reasons, it's a concurring opinion. Decision of jurisdiction. Decision of jurisdiction. What is considered when they decide who has jurisdiction? Either the parties involved or the subject matter. Either the parties involved or the subject matter, what they're talking about. And we'll stop there on number 50 and finish the rest on the next video.